Hey everyone, it's producer Josh. The crisis in Ukraine is the world's biggest story now. Waiting to see whether Russia will attack, what the US will do, and what will happen to the country. If you're an American Jew like me, this might be the first time you've really thought about Ukraine. Or maybe your family's from there, and you've even been back to visit. But for some religious Jews, Ukraine is a place that remains deeply significant, so vital to their observance that they make a pilgrimage there every year. They are the Breslover Hasids, and once a year, just before Rosh Hashanah, they descend on a city in Ukraine, Uman, for an ecstatic celebration at the grave of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. I know, it sounds a little nuts, and it sort of is. Our colleague Armin Rosen, a senior writer at Tablet, traveled to Uman this past fall to see the festivities for himself, the first major pilgrimage since the COVID pandemic shuttered international travel in 2020, and maybe the last before the possible outbreak of war. He wrote about that experience for Tablet in an article called The Jewish Burning Man. Of course, I also sent him with a travel recorder and begged him to get some audio while he was there. We thought we'd air a nice segment in the lead up to Rosh Hashanah this year. However, now that everybody's talking about Ukraine, we wanted to give you a different window into the country, a look at a tiny city that, for a few days each year, attracts thousands of followers of a rabbi who died more than 200 years ago, and whose legacy combines devout worship with the more mystical elements of Hasidic tradition. Here's Armin Rosen reporting from Uman.
Uman, Ukraine is a place that's simultaneously unimportant and extremely important, and this is what makes it so special. To most of the world, it's an obscure city of 85,000 in the heartlands of one of the poorest countries in Europe. This is not a tourist destination. There is no grand architecture. Much of what a visitor sees resembles a post-Soviet Dr. Seuss world with clusters of newly and hastily built hotels, apartment buildings, banquet halls, takeout stands, and tchotchke shops, all of which sit empty for most of the year. Every Rosh Hashanah, however, when the Jewish calendar begins anew, tens of thousands of religious Jews swarm into Uman, as if it's the most important place on earth. Why? Uman is where you'll find the tomb of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. The city is about halfway between Kiev and the port city of Odessa. The Rebbe died here in 1810, but just before, he called for his followers to celebrate every Jewish New Year with him. A few tens of thousands of other curious Jews tag along too, piling into a cramped and unscenic neighborhood in an obscure Ukrainian city on one of the most important holidays of the year. Rabbi Nachman famously said, "Come to me on Rosh Hashanah," so here we are. It's Friday, September 3rd, 2021, and I've just arrived in Uman. The pilgrims were eager to discuss why they'd made the long journey here. Pinchas from Lakewood, New Jersey, summed it all up.
I really spiritually, you asked me one of the reasons before, I just give a rundown why I come here, I keep coming back here. I literally feel my spiritual, and again, everyone has their own thing, but I literally feel that my lawyer for like the Day of Judgment, which is Rosh Hashanah, my lawyer is here.
You look around, like you're with a group of like-minded people, all coming for a similar purpose.
Yeah.
And I feel like that would give someone a feel like a rest stop on a long journey through life. You have like a rest stop once a year, Rosh Hashanah. You come here, you refuel with people, and it helps you out the year.
The pull of this place defies logical explanation. Nearly every Uman pilgrim has gotten on a plane and left their family behind during what's basically the Jewish version of Thanksgiving. These people think of a trip to a grimy Ukrainian city as an annual reset button, crucial to their spiritual health and just to their lives in general. They've been going to extreme lengths to get to the tomb for years. It was made almost unreachable by the Soviet Union between the late 1930s and communism's fall in the early 1990s. In 2020, very few people actually made the pilgrimage because of COVID and tight travel restrictions. In 2021, the crowds are huge again, if not entirely back to their pre-pandemic size. The pilgrimage can feel like an exhausting crush of people, with long and intense days ending in dorms you share with 7 other people. My Rosh Hashanah would still be a lot cushier than what Jewish visitors experienced in the early 90s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, when Uman had just opened back up. Rabbi Meir Elkabaz explains.
And of course, it wasn't like it was today. There were no showers. We're here for over a week with no showers. Food, we had to bring everything canned sardines, canned this, canned that, matzah, gefilte fish cans, glass jars, whatever. Once my mayonnaise opened up on a Lufthansa flight and they had to put my whole bag in another bag because the mayonnaise spilled. Oh boy, it stunk, okay? And there was like a stench everywhere. So physically, there was nothing. But the light people felt, there was such a light of holiness that can't be explained. The feeling of the yearning was unbelievably intense. People were getting dirty everywhere. There was dust everywhere, but people were extremely happy and they didn't feel anything. You felt you were on a real high. It was a real spiritual high.
So why this place and why this rabbi? The usual explanation is that Rabbi Nachman, founder of one of the most successful and influential sects of mystical Orthodox Judaism, is the so-called psychologist of the soul. He was someone whose ideas have a profundity and a straightforwardness that can make them resonate for nearly anyone. He told deep original stories and also wrote complex philosophical works. As a result, his followers span an unexpected range: Ashkenazi and Sephardi, lifelong devotees, or people who became students of the Rebbe late in life, the spiritual seekers. Rabbi Nachman died at the age of 38 in 1810. He wanted to be buried in Uman because its cemetery contained the graves of local Jews who had been massacred in a pogrom decades earlier. Shortly before his death, the rabbi made a promise to anyone who visited his tomb and recited the 10 Psalms from the Tikkun Klali, a book whose title means full repair. I asked Rabbi Elkabaz about this too. What's supposed to happen when you say Tikkun Klali at the Rebbe's tomb?
A lot. What do you mean what's supposed to happen?
You go, you take out the Tikkun Klali.
It's not magic. It's not like, okay, I'll do this and that's it. Hocus pocus. It's not hocus pocus. Rabbi Nachman has a lot of depth in the concept of the Tikkun Klali. What's written by him as what it's supposed to do. What you see or not is not necessarily a proof. Just because you don't see the changes doesn't mean also there's no changes. It doesn't work like that. Rabbi Nachman promised in front of 2 witnesses, he swore that he will do the maximum power that he has, and he shows and expresses that he has that power to pull a person out of the lowest depths of hell, no matter what he may have done. The main thing is that he wants to change from now on. This person has hope. What's unique about this is we don't find any tzaddik in Jewish history that has made such a commitment to a promise and oath such as that.
I wasn't in Uman this past Rosh Hashanah because I believed the rabbi who died 222 years ago would plead my case to Hashem in the afterlife. I was there because Uman Rosh Hashanah is an event with no real parallel, and this would be the first full-scale pilgrimage of the COVID era. This self-contained bubble of tens of thousands of Jews is strange and unlikely and unequaled by anything else in Judaism. And it only lasts 3 or 4 days. Uman Rosh Hashanah is supposed to be somewhere towards the peak of Jewish spiritual experience. It's also a lot of fun. There's music and dancing nearly everywhere. An expectation of a good time was only part of what drew me there. I know people who have been to Uman, and they described it the way some people talk about life-altering psychedelic experiences. If you wanted to see the light, Uman was a place you could actually do it. In contrast, the global pandemic has made everything seem a little less stable. Part of me thought, if I don't go this year, maybe I'll never have another chance. Although, as Nachman Fried, a young Breslover from Brooklyn, suggested, maybe none of these factors really explain why I ended up in Uman.
There's an idea that if you're here, that Rabbi Nachman wants you here. It's not you don't. It's not something you decide. Well, you feel like you decided it, but you're brought here for a purpose. So that's that.
The one big sight that Jews come to Uman to see is Rabbi Nachman's tomb itself. He is buried inside a wide and nondescript hall built in the 1990s on a platform jutting out from a steep hillside. The tomb's noisy central area has the same lived-in feel as a lot of other Jewish holy sites. On Friday afternoon, 2 days before Rosh Hashanah, it is practically bursting with people studying and praying.
Hour and a half till Yontif starts.
Getting close enough to touch the grave for just a few seconds requires some light shouldering and elbowing. Some visitors kiss its black surface. Some drape their faces and arms over the stone. Others pray with great intensity, and a few even cry. The original Ohel, the 19th century structure built over Rabbi Nachman's tomb, survived until 1942 when it was destroyed by the Nazis. After the war, a man named Daniel Zagajski wound up owning the property. What the Soviets didn't know was that he was a convert to Judaism. His papers didn't reflect it, so he could secretly protect the tomb, which was only marked by a concrete slab. In the 1960s and 70s, a handful of determined Breslovers made it to the tomb. They cleverly navigated the Soviet bureaucracy in order to pray in the nondescript side yard where their Rebbe was buried. The tomb was almost lost again when the house was nearly destroyed to make way for apartments in the late 1970s. Sparing the tomb proved to be the only real point of agreement between Jimmy Carter and Leonid Brezhnev during an especially unproductive US-Soviet summit meeting in 1979. A little over a decade later, the Soviet Union collapsed and Uman reopened as a pilgrimage site. It took the fall of 2 totalitarian regimes and a series of unlikely events, but the tomb had survived, and Jews could now freely pray there. There's a tradition that dates back to just after Rabbi Nachman's time that your trip to Uman shouldn't be too easy. Rabbi Binyamin Weinreb had an especially tough road to Uman. He was caught in Hurricane Ida's direct hit on New Jersey on the way to the airport. I met him a couple hours before Shabbos began.
I spent 48 hours getting here today. From Lakewood, Jersey.
Oh, you got here
Jersey.
today? Like, you got to Ukraine today?
I left my house at 8 o'clock Wednesday night.
Wow.
I just got here. I just pulled up a half hour ago.
Wow.
Not to mention
I lost my car along the way.
Wait, what? Oh, all right.
Oh, there's like flooding and stuff.
My car flooded while we're in it. I slept in the airport for 2 nights. We had a long journey, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
He had a simple explanation for why he was here.
Rabbi Nachman, he said so. And he's done more for me than most other people in my life. The beauty of Rabbi Nachman, certain rabbis talk to the people that are all the way at the top. The bigger the rabbi, the higher the students. Rabbi Nachman said the bigger the rabbi, the lower the students. The sicker a person is, the greater the doctor needs to be to heal them.
Huh.
So we see people here that are partying, people here that are, look like they're totally
Yeah.
off in the deep end. They also need Rabbi Nachman even more than us. They're more sick spiritually, they need a bigger doctor.
Yeah.
Nachman's a big enough doctor to be the doctor for the healthy people and the sick people.
On the Friday night before Rosh Hashanah, thousands gather in the Klois, the central Breslover shul in Uman. It's a hulking, unfinished structure with fluorescent lighting and concrete floors, a bit like a warehouse. You can see the traditional Breslovers davening slowly and with great concentration. Don't worry, of course I didn't record on Shabbat, but this was recorded Sunday and sounds exactly like what I heard. When you go to a different service with a different group of pilgrims, the vibe can dramatically swing. At around midnight, after Shabbat ended, Sephardic Jews at the tomb began davening slichot, the special prayers of repentance leading up to Yom Kippur. The tomb was packed with guys with dreadlocks, next to guys with payas, next to guys who looked like they were taking a break from running a Tel Aviv falafel shop. Frequently, the place would just kind of erupt. As pilgrims arrive, Jewish Uman goes from crowded to jam-packed. I met people who credited Rabbi Nachman with getting them out of trouble at work, and lawyers and psychiatrists who became Nachman heads later in life and now study his works together on Zoom. I kibitzed with Satmar Hasids and met a blissed-out American hippie kid who came to Uman for Hanukkah 9 months earlier and just never got around to leaving. He said he'd never been happier. Even in Sobieska Park, a stunning 18th century landscaped wilderness and the most famous non-Jewish thing in town, it was possible to find groups of Jews breaking out into song, like this one, which had just davened the afternoon mincha prayer on a cliff overlooking a winding artificial lake. There is a festive atmosphere in Uman for a couple days before Rosh Hashanah, but it doesn't really feel like a party exactly. Even with constant singing and dancing, the pilgrimage has a much more serious feel than any music festival I've been to. Seemingly a majority of the pilgrims are Hasidic Jews from places like Williamsburg and Beit Shemesh. Sephardim from Israel are probably the second largest demographic. The Yeshivish and American Modern Orthodox pop up in visible numbers too. And then there's another smaller but still very significant group, the Hasidic hippies. They're Jewishly observant spiritual seekers, drawn to the interplay of joy and seriousness that permeates many of Rabbi Nachman's ideas. In Uman, they daven in a tent and hostel complex called Nakuda Tova, meaning positive point, a reference to Rabbi Nachman's instruction to find just one good attribute in everyone. Menachem Engel has been to Uman for over a dozen Rosh Hashanahs, using Nakuda Tova as his usual base during the holiday. Today, he lives in Sfat, the historic center of Jewish mysticism in northern Israel, where he has a wife and young family and works as a commercial composer and music producer. Engel has the wild beard of a biker, the laid-back attitude of a musician, and the outlook of a Hasid of Rabbi Nachman.
You sit there, Rabbi Nachman says that you can talk to him and you can tell him anything you want. So it's like you're really, obviously you're not supposed to ask a tzaddik who's dead for, things, but you're allowed to talk to him about what's going on in your life. Just like a regular chassid would go to his Rebbe who's alive today, you can go and talk to him about what's going on. And that's what I plan on doing after we finish this thing. I got to go to the Tzion for like a good hour and talk to him about my whole life.
Rabbi Nachman's eclecticness is part of the appeal, especially for someone like Engel.
And also, it's a big thing in Breslov to dance every single day.
Really?
And yeah. Rabbi Nachman
dance every day.
Rabbi Nosson says, who's Rabbi Nachman's main student, that you are supposed to dance every single day, and that is a form of tshuva. It's a form of repentance. So while everybody's dancing, it breaks harsh judgments from heaven. So maybe even before I go in the Tzion, I'm going to probably do a little hopping up and down, you know what I'm saying?
What's interesting is that it's like you're dancing for teshuva. You're not dancing for fun necessarily. It's not supposed to be like
you're
frivolous.
dancing to connect. It's like a real holy experience also. You're building up like a holy sweat.
At noon on the day before Rosh Hashanah, pilgrims cram into the tomb and into the surrounding streets. From a side room behind the grave, a chazan leads a massive reading of the Tikkun Klali, broadcast over loudspeakers. At the beginning of each of the psalms, people scream the first line, clap their hands, and bellow to the heavens. The sounds of the 10 psalms echo through a city where Jews were nearly exterminated within living memory. Now, every single Jew who's come is in the same place, singing the same sacred words together. As a first-time visitor, I felt there was a lot of pressure for something to happen over Rosh Hashanah. Like if you don't have a moment of pure spiritual insight, or feel you've been elevated to the highest of all heights, or feel Rabbi Nachman tugging on your non-existent payas, does it actually mean you've wasted the trip? Rabbi Nachman anticipated these sorts of questions. He said that coming to Uman for Rosh Hashanah was enough. You didn't even have to daven. Your Rosh Hashanah was already deeply meaningful just by being in Uman. You're there, and for the next several days, you're surrounded by thousands of fellow pilgrims praying and celebrating all day long. And then suddenly, it's over. Uman starts clearing out almost the moment Rosh Hashanah ends. That's when I caught up with Menachem Engel again, who said a quick getaway is what Rabbi Nachman wants from us.
Somebody asked the Rebbe, like, what do I do after Rosh Hashanah? Like, what do I do like when I go to a tzaddik? He's like, you go to the tzaddik, you get what you need, and then you run back home. You don't have to linger around. There's nothing to linger around for. You have to go back home and do what you need to do now.
The Uman Rosh Hashanah I experienced is a chaotic and sleep-deprived few days spent far away from family and friends in a place that's rapidly becoming overbuilt, and that might be too popular for its own good. For me, it was also a mass reconciliation of a past that can seem fragile and in danger. This is not just Uman's past, but the entire Jewish people's. I think that's the reason working-class Sephardim and Nachlaot hippies and borough park construction workers and randos like me wind up in Uman, even if it's all sort of subconscious. We feel the pull and the power of bringing something to life. And we get something in return, too. By the end of Rosh Hashanah here, a total stranger could look me in the eye and promise that great things were coming. And it didn't feel the least bit weird.
It's your first time here?
Yeah.
You're gonna have the wildest year ever. You ready?